You're now listening to the Deep Edge Podcast with your host, technology expert Ray Mota, giving you the rundown on telecom, cloud, and all things business and tech. This is the Deep Edge Podcast. Let's go.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Deep Edge Podcast. And please note that in this particular episode, we'll be distributing this in video and audio in your favorite platform. And I'm excited that joining us today, we're very honored to have Mike Bushong, who's Group Vice President for Cloud Ready Data Centers at Juniper Networks. Mike, thanks for joining the podcast.
Absolutely, my pleasure. It's good to spend time together again.
Yeah, exciting that you were able to get me during baseball season, just when the playoffs are about to start. So good timing.
It is. My team is in the playoffs.
That's right. Both our teams are in the playoffs. So I guess we're all in a good mood. Now, Mike, maybe before we get started, could you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to your current role at Juniper?
Sure. I mean, the short story is started designing jet engines in college, became a tech writer. I mentioned that because it's kind of an awkward origin story. Went through the years at like silicon design companies, moved into networking, found out I'm pretty good at strategy, bounced around, tried to make my fame and riches in SDN, and then ultimately ended up back here at Juniper, where I lead our data center business all up, which covers off, certainly hardware and software, and then obviously the space we'll talk about today.
This is excellent. I know you for all these years, and I didn't know that part of your background. So that's thanks for sharing that. Maybe we just start off with what are you hearing from the SPs?
So we focus a lot on the telco cloud space. They're looking obviously at how they roll out new services, and it's hard to talk about anything in the cloud space without mentioning the hyperscalers. I mean, there's real questions, right? Are hyperscalers, are they partners? Are they competition? And so what everyone's trying to figure out is, what's the extent to which you cooperate or that you compete with these types of companies? How do you structure your strategy so that you can control your business? What are the routes to market going to be? What are the product and underlying service implications? And then ultimately, how does that going to break out into the business, where you start looking at the division of profit pools? I mean, that was really kind of the crux of the conversation.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's been a hot topic for a while there. And I think some of that is from a hyperscaler's point of view, doing a better job of having to show the visibility and the plan on how to better partner. And in some cases, it might be a co-opetition type strategy, who knows, right? So it's interesting to hear that. But what did they specifically say, the direction about, their relationship with these hyperscalers moving forward? Do they feel there's an important role, and what was the driver for that?
If you essentially concede your business to the hyperscalers and put everything in the hyperscale space, you lose control, right? You lose ownership of the accounts. There's actually service and performance implications if you're just using hyperscale points of presence. If you look at where the data centers are, things like performance still matter, and so how do you meet individual customer requirements if you're beholden to somebody else to create the data centers that service those applications? The big question though is like whose business thrives in that model and who maintains control. Some people have very, very firm ideas of where strategically they're going to go, and other folks are probably earlier in their journey and their discovery process. And it's interesting to see just how different people are in how they're looking at the problem space, and it leads to kind of wildly different perspectives on. I mean, we really are kind of in this phase where it's what are the right decisions to make? How do we navigate the current economic climate? Especially in Europe, by the way, where things like the U.S. dollar trading at all-time highs against local currencies. What does that mean for capex?
Yeah, no, I think that's a hot topic from that perspective. And one of the things you mentioned is about different angles from that regarding type of latency requirements. I mean, when you look at the whole thing about, private cloud, right, is there are some potential advantages there. And how are SPs navigating to plan that? We hear this whole discussion about creating some type of vertical or horizontal offering.
Yeah, so I guess generally, if they look at the overall services, there's two models, right? You can have a vertically oriented or vertically integrated stack. or you can have a horizontal stack where you look at like a traditional platform play. And I think there's a little bit of nervousness in the big vertical stacks, primarily because you lose economic leverage. If you are bought into like a single stack, then they own, that vendor, that supplier owns end to end. And if that's the case, then the challenge is that the pricing that you enjoy in year one is not the same as the pricing you enjoy in year 5. And if the transitions are operational, it's not merely deploying new equipment. I mean, you're talking about retooling, entire processes, requalifying services, which is typically a multi-year endeavor. And so if you lose pricing leverage, there's actually no easy exit. And so there's a lot of discussion, I would say actually rough consensus, that if they can create freedom from using a horizontal platform, and then you can use either best of breed or at least create a little bit of competition in the individual service components, that gives you kind of economic control over your fate, which obviously if you're staring at margin pressure generally at a business level, if you're looking at macroeconomic headwinds, maintaining some control over your fate seem to be again a pretty widely popular opinion in terms of where to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is great, because I think, there's a lot of discussions about certain architecture, but not enough discussion about the impact on the business, right? Side of it. What do you feel that SP should do about their whole distribution of the profit pools there?
I think you have to understand, or at least develop an opinion about how you think the profit pools will be divided between you and the partners. I think there's probably 3 dominant models. One, you can presume that the service providers maintain control of the account, and that essentially the hyperscale part, the cloud part of it, is merely part of the service. That obviously gives the SPs control over the account. It gives them control over the service. It gives them the ability to decide how the profit pools are divided up. The other model is that, it's like a meet in the market. What they're going to do is, enterprises will essentially use cloud. They'll use connectivity services from the SP side. And in that model, the idea generally is, people purchase what they purchase, and the pricing will kind of dictate how the profit pools are divided. I think that's actually a pretty dangerous position to take, right? If the thing that they're looking for, the enterprises are looking for, is to move a workload to cloud, then the dynamic that'll dominate pricing and really the distribution of the profit pools will be how the cloud is priced. So if there's 100 fictional dollars to spend, and the cloud in that situation, let's say the hyperscale charges $80 for their service, the SPs can't go back and say, well, my service is worth 50. They're going to get whatever's left over. So even in the meet in the market model, where it's a kind of friendly co-opetition, if you will, they actually lose control in that particular model. And then of course there's the cloud model, which says that the connectivity service is merely a part of the cloud service, in which case the pricing is fully dictated by the cloud, the hyperscalers who own the relationship with the customer. So obviously in that model, that's even more dire. The point of all of this, though, is that even that middle one, which is kind of where people they tend to think of that as safe neutral ground, I don't think that's actually going to be safe and neutral ground, which means that the service providers need to be thinking today, how do they construct their services so they can essentially maintain the billing relationship with the customer, because that gives them control over how the dollars are going to be distributed. And if that's the case, then what's the value that they have to provide in order to make that relationship stick? And it's not just providing connectivity. I think you have to think through a little bit like what's the role of the service provider there? And then there's certain competitive advantages that the service providers need to lean into. Certainly, if you look at the hyperscalers, they've got data centers, but it turns out, like as you mentioned, right, things like performance matter, things like latency matter. Things like the location of your data center actually matter. And so if you've got all of this real estate, how do you leverage that to go and dictate the terms under which you're going to partner with the hyperscalers? I think there's elements of that can be really transformative in how you forge those partnerships.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. You did a good job breaking it down into the different components. Maybe we can close with a little bit about, from a Juniper point of view. I mean, what is Juniper's strategy and position regarding this?
So, obviously we call the largest service providers customers. They are all using and have been using Juniper stuff for a long time. We provide horizontal platforms. We believe in choice and flexibility fundamentally. We believe it unlocks some of the economics and performance things that need to that need to play into this. So I think we generally want to help, the service providers maintain control. We also obviously have, great partnerships with the hyperscalers. We do a lot of business with all of the cloud companies. And so, the question is, what are the technologies that have to bridge between these? And we think that we can provide those technologies. The thing that I would say strategically though, right, what we want to do is help folks navigate the overall transition.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a pure technology transition. I think people that look at this as, an OpEx or CapEx exercise, that look at this as a protocol or a technology and they reduce it to just execution, I think they're missing the bigger game here. And I think the role that Juniper ultimately will play is that we're in this unique position to see kind of all sides of the problem space, which allows us to act a little bit like a consultant in the space and talk a bit about what are the things you should consider. I won't say that we always have the right answers for everybody. Indeed, you want companies to own their strategy themselves because they have to arrive at those decisions. But we are in a unique position to help surface the right questions. And then those questions, and certainly the answers to those questions, have implications on the underlying technology. I think if you can plumb that through, then you can get clear line of sight, which should give service providers. What's missing is the confidence to move forward deliberately in a particular direction. If we can help convey that confidence, then I think we put people in a better position to execute.
Yeah, no, this is excellent. I'm going to give you a round of applause from my audience there. Mike, thanks for joining the podcast. Hopefully you'll join us again and give us an update in a few months.
Of course.
Well, with Mike, this is Ray Mota. Thanks for joining this edition of the Deep Edge podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Deep Edge Podcast. Make sure to follow Ray Mota on Twitter and LinkedIn at @rmota. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on iTunes. Want even more? Head over to acgcc.com to access exclusive bonus content. Till next time.